He was calm, sharp, and in control. Christopher Vizzina looked a lot more than just a backup. He looked like the potential future for the Tigers. We'll talk about it all coming up right now on Locked on Clemson.
You are Locked on Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here, Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of this show, Locked on Clemson, and part-time host and producer over at 105.5 and 97.5 FM, The Roar, the Clemson flagship station. Thank you so much for making Locked on Clemson your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and also the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We put out exclusive Clemson content Monday through Friday. You know how Locked on does it every single week. And don't forget, in between episodes, you can follow me over on X at The Morgan T Show. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We're going to talk a ton about quarterbacks this episode and continue our series, if you will, on the spring game, because there was a lot to kind of digest from going to see the game and kind of some thoughts that we've seen on social media, some thoughts we've heard on the radio, and I want to get into it and get your opinion as well, and also give you mine from my perspective. But I wanted to start off today's show with Christopher Vizzina and how he shined in the spring game, kind of really leaving that backup role behind in a sense, because he kind of showed what he can do for the team in 2025 and hopefully for him in 2026. It looked like that Christopher Vizzina didn't just improve. It looked like he could be a guy who could start for a lot of good teams out there. And that's a big jump from what we saw in the past. Now, last spring, Christopher Vizzina didn't look that good. You know, we've seen a couple of years with him, and it's kind of iffy. He struggled with timing. Big time for me was timing, just being off, not being able to get the ball in the right spot at the right time, not being able to release at the right time. And that affected his confidence. It affected his consistency, and it just kind of snowballed and rolled downhill. And I really kind of felt like, wow, maybe I was confused on my analysis of him way back in the day when we were watching his huddle film, and we thought, okay, this is a guy that could fit into the Clemson offense immediately and could push Cade Klubnik immediately because of what he brings to the table. Fast forward now to 2025 spring game, and he's slinging it. I mean, he's throwing accurate passes. He's managing the offense well. He's flashing a little mobility. Now, I know the mobility part's a little bit difficult because it is a spring game. They can't just nail you out there because you're the quarterback. But being able to manage the offense, that's a good thing for a backup. Being able to make accurate passes, that helps you from the coaching standpoint of being able to trust that player a little bit more. He finished the game with 7 of 8 and 83 yards. A smooth 10-yard run that could have gone a little bit further if quarterbacks were allowed to be hit. I think that it showed his mobility, it showed his consistency, and really kind of improved his confidence overall. He said after the game just how confident he was and how thankful he was to have the opportunity to go ones-on-ones. And that to me is a big deal too, because this type of scenario and scenes that we saw from the spring game really kind of give you a true look, almost like a fly on the wall into practice. Did it not feel like that when you walked away from the spring game, that you kind of felt like you learned a little bit about Clemson, that you kind of saw more than you've ever seen in a spring environment? And specifically about Christopher Vizzina, he to me is a game-ready backup now. He's not just a guy who is an experiment, still learning the ropes, still kind of trying to figure out his own way, still really far behind, still very raw. To me, he kind of showed that he has taken that step forward and is a guy that if there was something where you needed to get him in the game, you could confidently believe in him to manage the offense and to make the passes that are needed and stay on schedule. And we've seen that in the past. Trevor Lawrence needed a backup and Chase Bryce. We had guys in there where you needed guys to rotate in and out at certain opportunities and not just in blowout wins. Sometimes games are on the line still. And I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that Cade Klubnik stays healthy the entire season, but you never know. And it also will help Cade Klubnik get better. When you have a guy like Christopher Vizzina who is doing well, it will push Cade to do better. He looks confident for me, the biggest breakdown for me and the biggest things that I wrote down was that the confidence, really. Number one, he's clearly, the game is starting to slow down for him a little bit more. Now, it is still the spring, but the game being able to slow down for him was what we didn't see last spring. So, the fact that there was some improvement there shows some encouragement. And maybe Garrett Riley has been able to kind of work with him, and Taj Boyd and some of the other guys there, been able to work with him on the footwork, command the offensive line. He is noticeably better. Probably one of the guys that if you're a diehard fan, if you really study spring ball, I'm assuming you circled his name and wrote his name down and said, okay, this is a guy I would give as possibly an MVP. This is a guy I would give as a winner of the spring. This is a guy I would give as one of the most improved players so far. For me, that all comes back to that he's put in the work when we weren't watching, and now he's more confident because he's seeing the game better. His throws had really good touch. He didn't just rely on slinging it, He's not kind of like what we've seen in the past where all you can do is throw deep balls, or all you can do is scramble. He did seem to have been able to improve his timing, improve his touch on his throws, and he layered different throws throughout the game. In his 7 out of 8, I think you saw a mixture of many different things. You see things over the middle, you see things to the flats, hitting guys in stride. To me, I think that this was a huge success for Christopher Vizzina when it comes to confidence, when it comes to touch, showing that he's improved in his timing. And that mobility piece too, he doesn't really look like a guy that would kill you with his legs. I'm going to be honest, it's not a knock against him or to say he's unathletic at all, but he just really kind of doesn't, to me, warrant like worrying a defense too much in his mobility. But he does have some mobility. He can roll out, and he rolled out to the right and tuck it and ran for 10 yards. And that's something that Garrett Riley likes to do, that Dabo Swinney likes to do. You've got to have a mobile quarterback with Clemson. We've seen it in the past with other quarterbacks. I like quarterbacks that are a little bit more of a basketball type player, a little bit more of a pickup basketball type player. And we'll talk about Chris Denson and his dual threat ability in the second segment. But Christopher Vizzina has a little bit more of that. He's to me a baseball player. He wasn't always a football player. He didn't start playing football and playing quarterback specifically until he was like in middle school. He had kind of always played baseball and basketball, so he has a little bit of that can transition into that mobility on the football field. And I think that's something that can help Clemson, when he is needed. Now, the hope is that you don't really need him too much in 2025. But hasn't he kind of shown to you a little bit that maybe this is a guy that can fight for 2026? Cade Klubnik's not going to be around in 2026. So hasn't this been a guy that has kind of shown you a little bit of like, hey, don't forget about me? And that's what I love about that. This is a guy who hasn't walked away. He hasn't transferred out. He hasn't given up. He's still grinding. He obviously loves the culture of Clemson, wants to be around the coaching staff and Dabo Swinney. But this is a guy that may not get a ton of years with Clemson, but the years that he does get could be big. He still has an opportunity to become a starter eventually for Clemson. Now, I know what you're saying. This wasn't the LSU defense, and I'm not ever going to say that. It wasn't the LSU defense. I know that. But that's not really the point. The point is that he did exactly what he needed to do in the spring game. He played a clean spring game. He played smart. He led drives. He led the offensive line. He made moves, and he showed us what he can do in different aspects of his game. It wasn't always one thing. He did all that and more, and kind of convinced, I think, most of Clemson Nation that he deserves another look. Maybe not a starter look, but he definitely deserves not to be forgotten. And I like that about him. I think he's going to continue to grow. Now, if Cade Klubnik, something ever happens to him, in the past, what have we said? Oh my God, we don't have anything else. We don't have any other options. Now I think Christopher Vizzina steps in, and he can fit into Garrett Riley's system and what Dabo Swinney wants to do, and he can help continue continuity, if that's how you say it, I guess. But he can help keep it going, even when you don't have your starters in there for whatever reason. Now, hopefully it's not for medical reasons, but I will say this: I have a lot more confidence now going into 2025 with Christopher Vizzina. Before it was like, hey, let's just keep him in the blowouts. I don't want to play him too much. But Christopher Vizzina's growth is real. Clemson fans should be on notice now, and you got to feel great knowing that they actually have a QB2, and they probably even have a QB3 now. We'll talk about him as well. But Clemson's backups look ready to get in there, and not just kind of garbage time get in there. I'm talking about get in there and compete and push Cade Klubnik to be even better as well. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about Chris Denson and how he might be Clemson's next greatest dual threat superstar at the quarterback position. There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge until Gametime. Gametime makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices usually drop as the event gets closer, and with their all-in pricing, you can see the total cost up front, no surprises. Their lowest price guarantee means you never have to worry about overpaying, and you can see the seats before you buy. So no surprise fees and no surprise seats, and the lowest price guarantee, you can book it with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app and create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Chris Denson wasn't just a pleasant surprise. He was a shot of adrenaline into the quarterback room. 3-star flip from Coastal Carolina. Denson entered the spring ball under the radar, but after the spring game, man, he looked poised, he looked confident, and he looked, the big word for me, dangerous. All right. He finished 4 for 4 for 53 yards and added in a scramble that would have been a huge highlight reel if the quarterbacks were live. But we know how spring game goes. The quarterbacks weren't live. But for me, Denson has an it factor, doesn't he? If you were there and you watch this guy, don't you feel like he just has something? Maybe it's just the left-handedness of him. Maybe it's the scramble ability, the true dual threat. But he kind of feels electric. He kind of feels like he brings something extra, some spice, some sauce, as Bryant Wesco would say. Something is a little bit different about him. He's got a chip on his shoulder a little bit because he's got something to prove. You haven't really felt like Clemson's had a guy like this since Kelly Bryant. And I love Kelly Bryant. I wish that Clemson still had him around because, man, he brought a lot to the table and he was dynamic and he frustrated defenses a ton. Now, was he the best quarterback in the world? No, he wasn't the best quarterback in the world, but man, he could definitely frustrate quarterbacks. And the guy that was the most confident in himself in the whole locker room was Kelly Bryant. I mean, he believed that he was better than anybody out there. Nobody was better than him. And Kelly Bryant had that confidence. And you need that swagger. You need that chip on your shoulder. You need that cockiness at the quarterback position. I don't know if Denson fits all those things, but I will say this, the it factor, there's something, the electricity there's something there. Maybe it's the tempo, the pace that he plays at, but I love what I see so far. A few things that I wrote down from the spring game. One, perfect passing. He didn't miss. Every throw was on time. Every throw was accurate, including a gorgeous wheel route to Gideon Davidson. So you're liking what you're seeing. Young guy with young guy out there. He's really just kind of calm already. He's got a poise about him that I wasn't expecting from a true freshman. You know, he's cool in the pocket, didn't seem to really panic a ton. When the plays were kind of breaking down a little bit, he moved around, and Clemson and Dabo Swinney just could not stop raving about how good he was, how calm he was, and just his demeanor the entire game. And what I really love is that he is actually that dual threat guy. I mean, he is truly a guy you haven't had in quite some time. In high school, he rushed for a ton of yards, thousands of yards. I mean, it's crazy. He's got mobility. He's got a little bit of touch. He's got the combo that I think could be another weapon for Garrett Riley. Now, will you use him a ton in 2025? Probably not, right? Probably not. But this is a guy that could add a little bit more and kind of open up options or possibilities for maybe some sort of specific package that you might want to throw him in there. Now, it might be only in situations where the game's out of hand, but I look forward to seeing how he develops year over year. I think we haven't seen this in so long, this type of true dual threat guy. So there's a lot to be excited about. And I saw on social media a lot of people talking about him, and a lot of people got in the comments over on our YouTube channel and said, Morgan, what about Chris Denson? You didn't say anything about him. All you did was drool about Tristan Smith. And that's true. There was a lot to drool about him for sure. But with Chris Denson, it feels good right now. It feels like Clemson has something. It could be a pleasant surprise, maybe not something that we can enjoy immediately, but kind of a sign of something in the future that we can see. Now, I know the counter argument could be, well, Morgan, don't freak out here. You're doing too much for me in the spring. It's a small sample size, and I can understand that. The true freshman is an early enrollee, and but he doesn't have a lot, right? We don't have a lot to choose from. We don't have a big sample size. I get that, but I mean, 4 for 4. And he was poised in the pocket. He was calm, cool, and collect. He's a true dual threat. He's got that lefty throwing motion that you love. He looks great in the orange. I mean, he's got it. It's not fake. It's real. And it could be something that you could really build on. And a lot of people felt like, oh, well, this was a late take and, probably, not going to bring much to the table. I say not so fast. He's definitely going to bring something to the table now. And it goes back to what Clemson has and what Clemson needs and what Cade Klubnik needs. Cade Klubnik needs guys behind him that are actually pushing him to be better. And this adds just even more wrinkles to that because Denson also does that. He gives something new, something that they just haven't had in a long time. A mobile quarterback that is a project for sure. He's a project, but he's got an arm. To me, the ceiling is very high for Chris Denson. And I look forward to seeing more of him. I don't know how much we're going to see in 2025. And if you're seeing him as a starter, that's going to be kind of scary because other things would be going on wrong if he's actually out there as a starter. But this is a project that I'm looking forward to see growing and developing even more. When I look at some of the things that we see from him and some of the notes that I have on him from when we were looking at him from a recruiting standpoint on the radio, he's a lefty dual threat, kind of out of nowhere. A lot of people don't know about him, but if you're a fan of this show, you should know about him. Chris Denson, 6'2", left-handed, Plant City, Florida. Really didn't get, a ton of action from big universities out there. Clemson swooped in late. Guy slung it in high school. 4,813 yards passing, 55 touchdowns, ran for over 2,000 yards. Just a 3-star. But I'm telling you, nobody looks at stars, right? Don't get too caught up in the stars here. He was originally with Coastal Carolina. They locked him up last spring, but Dabo came in, swooped in late in November, got him. Underrated? Definitely. He's definitely an underrated guy. But this is the kind of guy that can really make a recruiting class pop for all the good reasons because, a lot of these recruits and a lot of these analysts out there, if you don't go to these big time events, if you don't go to these big time 7-on-7s or camps, then they're not going to talk about you and they're not going to rate you high. They're only going to look at your huddle film and that's it. And that's not fair. These guys are much better than that. Some of these guys have a lot of potential and they just never got looked at. Dabo Swinney has Cade Klubnik now in 2025. Chris Denson is kind of a fun new project for Clemson in 2025 and in the future. Is he raw? Yeah, definitely. But he's got potential. He could steal the show later on down in the road, a couple of years down, we could really be talking about Chris Denson doing something for Clemson and moving them forward. There's a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a concern between what happens after Cade Klubnik leaves. And I think after the spring game, I'm more confident than ever that I've been about these backups, right? And what they can do. In high school, Denson, 63.6% completion percentage. Only 13 interceptions in his entire career, and he had 8 100-yard rushing games. And he had a one game where he had a 235-yard rushing game and a 202-yard passing game. Garrett Riley called him an absolute weapon. He reminded us that he was calm, cool, and collected. You don't get that from a true freshman much. They're not ready for the moment. They're playing from behind. Their timing's completely off. Their footwork's terrible. All they know how to do is rely on their arm. But this is a quarterback that kind of seems like he's been there, right? And the transfer portal, the negative of the transfer portal kind of happened to him. He was at certain places or being looked at certain places, but those places were bringing in grad talent, veteran talent from the transfer portal. And so he got into a situation where it was going to be maybe much longer. And now he's at Clemson and he kind of has an opportunity. He's going to develop this year. He's going to get a lot of education. He's going to have to be a sponge this year. But in 2026 could be a year where he pushes for that. He's going to be a redshirt freshman or a sophomore, and he could be really saying, hey, you know what? You remember what you saw with me in 2025 spring game? I got more of that, a lot more of that. To me, he has just something about him, right? Just something there. I can't wait to see more Chris Denson. I'm glad that Clemson now has a quarterback room with Trent Pierman as well. That just seems like the best group they've had in quite some time, and they're going to push everybody to be better. That's the way I see it. You won't see Denson in 2025 much, but if he continues to develop, this could be like a diamond in the rough secret weapon type guy down the road. 2025, 2026, raw, but could be the real deal later on. I'm looking forward to it. All right, we're going to finish up the show, wrap up everything with the final segment, talking about Cade Klubnik throwing an interception and how worried we should be about that. Cade Klubnik threw a pick on Saturday, and yes, it was ugly, but really wasn't the full story, really. Cade didn't play much, and when he did, he was against a defense that, in my opinion, when you go out and look at the schemes that they were throwing at him, it was designed to create pressure on him, designed to force decisions on him, and really ultimately put him in a difficult situation, because that's what's going to happen to him in fall. You're going to have defenses really stressing him out. And I want them to go ahead and stress him out now. You don't need to be able to have all the big time plays from Cade, because then we'd be worried about the defense. He had an interception with Khalil Barnes. It was a bad read, but it doesn't define what he's done in the spring. And it really kind of fits into what you were expecting from the Clemson defense against Cade Klubnik, your number one. Of any guy you want to build up confidence, it's your number one, or it's your number two and your number three. That's the way I see it now with spring. I've said it in the past, even last week, I felt like a little bit different. But now as I sit down and I kind of weigh things out, the best case scenario is to pump up your number three and number two guy. Make them look like superstars. Isn't Dabo Swinney doing that? Hasn't he been doing that? And the best case scenario for Cade Klubnik is to stress him out to the max, because he's going to be your number one. He's going to be in the fire. And he is going to play the best defenses that Clemson is going to get, and they're going to get thrown at a lot of different coverages. He needs to figure out what works, what doesn't work, when timing will work, when reads will work, and what different kind of alignments work, what different kind of schemes will work and not work. And if he sees more and more what doesn't work, it's just going to help him further down the road. And Khalil Barnes, I couldn't be more happier for him, because, man, I tell you what, I ripped him up last season, and he deserved it. Honestly, he earned being ripped up last season, because he had a poor sophomore season, really. We need Khalil Barnes to be much better than he was last season, and he knows that too. But Khalil Barnes going out and taking advantage of a poor read, and he could have even taken that for a pick six, in my opinion. And that's exactly what you need for Barnes. He's going to be a guy who's going to develop into a leader on this defense, and he's going to show it on and off the field. I truly believe he's a class act and a character guy. Kind of got caught a lot. Caught anticipating wrong plays, poor reads on his part. Khalil Barnes made a great read on the defensive side of the bar, bad read for Cade Klubnik. But to me, it doesn't define everything. Klubnik is still number one. Don't panic. Don't overreact. It's just one spring game, and it was a mistake. But you want to stress out Cade to the max. Spring isn't really huge on scheme heavy, but it's about getting Cade to see what matchups work and don't work. Actually getting the coaches to see what matchups work and don't work. Not really showing your best stuff, but just seeing what one-on-one work. Okay, you got this type of defender. We know our defenders better than anybody, but we know what their comps are compared to our opponents, right? And so if we match up this wide receiver with that wide receiver, how does Cade and that wide receiver work together? Was that wide receiver able to break that and able to win that matchup or not? And if there's a similar player that your opponent that you're playing against in the fall, now hey, this might be a matchup that's going to struggle for this wide receiver. Cade was likely told to test a lot of things as well. We don't really talk about that a ton. We kind of just rag on Cade and how bad he is in the spring games. And he hasn't been the best. He hasn't been electrifying or really awesome in the spring games like we've seen in the past. But, I think Cade goes out there and he knows that he's going to get pushed to the max. He knows that he's going to be stressed, and he knows that the offense needs to be tested. He knows that his outside wide receivers need to be tested. His players need to be tested, and the routes need to be tested, right? So I think ultimately it shows that the coaching staff knows what they're doing. It shows that the quarterback is okay with testing certain looks, and it shows that Cade Klubnik is a leader, right? His leadership is still elite, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, I believe, going into 2025. He's vocal, he's involved, and he's obviously respected by the staff, respected by his teammates. You can't fake that, and you don't really always see that in the spring environment, but it's going to show in the fall. Everything still runs through Cade. There is no competition in the quarterback room right now. We know that, but there is preparation. And with quarterback 2 getting more confidence and trusting himself more and pushing himself more can also help Cade. Quarterback number 3, Denson, pushing himself more and showing out that he has a little spice to bring to it. It adds to that preparation in the spring. You want the stress on your number 1 quarterback now in the spring because he's going to get the most of it in the fall. Clemson needs to eventually transition to, testing to then focusing on LSU. And the guy that you're going to focus on LSU with is Cade Klubnik. As long as there's no injuries, no anything like that, Cade Klubnik's your number 1 guy, and he's focused on LSU. And he will be. You're going to have Vizzina and Denson back in the back and Pierman as well. And that's a better quarterback room than you've ever had. But, I know what you're saying. A lot of times you could think like, well, Cade, he throws these picks that are the dumbest picks you've ever seen. I don't think he's going to not do that. I think that he's still going to test himself here and there. He's going to make you hold your breath at times. But what you saw on Saturday is really just a guy that is doing what he needs to do in April, really. I don't have any problems with it. I think he will make some similar mistakes in September, but not as many. And spring games matter, but they don't matter, right? They matter because they allow you to do these kind of things. They allow you to stress out your quarterback. They allow you to test things and to see what works and doesn't work. Overall, even you can get bad out of good, right? All for good, as they say. So you want to be able to do these things in practice, and that's what we saw from the spring game. That's why I love it. I love this format. I hope they never go back. I'm already saying it now. I like the format. I love what they did. I even loved at the very end when C.J. Spiller got to catch a punt, and even when a fan got to catch a punt. I loved it. From top to bottom, even the field day before the game, loved it all. So Clemson did exactly what they needed to do. I think they're taking a step forward in many different positions. And there, to me, is less questions than more questions. And we haven't been always able to say that from a Clemson spring game, have we not? So Klubnik, I think overall is going to continue to grow. And I'm feeling that this fall is going to be his best season. And if not, then really he had no other options. I mean, we gave him everything he needed. He's got Garrett Riley. He's got a great offensive line. He's got a running back. He's got a couple of running backs that we trust. He's got great wide receivers that we've had in a while. So he has all the pieces in place to have his peak season, his legendary season, if you will. So just continue to take what you've learned in the spring and grow from that. A bad throw for sure, but able to continue to be the leader, continue to be the number 1, and continue to progress and get better week in, week out. Still Cade Klubnik's team and his season to own it. I think he will, but it is definitely up to him. Hey, thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite collegiate players get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Check out Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to follow me over on X in between episodes at The Morgan T Show. You can let me know what you think in the comments on YouTube or over on social media. And as always, Tiger fans, we'll see you at the top of the hill.